Welcome to Module 5 of C# arrays. In the first module, or in the first iteration of this module, we discussed what arrays are. In this iteration of the module, we're going to discuss single-dimensional arrays. So let's get started. So, what are single-dimensional arrays and how do they work? Well, a single-dimensional array is an array that has a sequence of like elements. Now, in scripting languages like JavaScript, Perl, PHP, PowerShell, Python, you don't necessarily have to determine what data type your array needs to be. However, in higher level languages like C# and Java, we have to determine what the array sequence or the array data type will be. So if I want to have strings in an array, I have to be purposeful and explicit about stating verbosely that I want that single dimensional array to only contain data types which are of data type string. Now, the great part about an array is it's different from a variable, as we discussed in the last iteration of this module, where an array in and of itself is, for the most part, a deterministic type object, which literally means that it doesn't adhere to the same rules of random access that variables do. And when I'm speaking about random access, I'm speaking specifically about when a processor saves an array or saves anything to a storage location in your RAM, in your virtual access, in your random access memory. What is actually happening is the PC selects at random a place in the memory to place that. It's the most efficient way to do it. It's the fastest way to do it. But one of the problems that we experience with this is that when you randomly place a value within a storage location in your random access memory randomly, you have to remember where you put it. It's not organized. Whereas with an array, if I had multiple variables that were of like data type and of like, sequence or element, then what I can do is I can stick them in an array. Now, an array in and of itself still requires a storage location, and that storage location could be randomly selected by the processor. But one of the caveats to an array is that it's in sequence from left to right, and that sequence is derived or created at the initialization or the declaration of the array. So when I want to create the array, I want to declare it. This means I'm creating the array, but I'm not putting any values in it. I have to tell the array how large it will be. Now, what's interesting about this is that once I do that, the array is immutable. We've used this word before in previous modules. What is immutability? Immutability, or being immutable, means that a specific thing is locked and cannot change. We think of that as a constant, but constants and immutability are not the same thing when it comes to compilation of the code. An array's size is immutable after the array is declared. And so you have to be careful about determining how big an array is after the fact, because you can't change how large the array is. What you would have to do if you wanted to create, or if you wanted to make that array larger to contain more values, to hold more positions, what you would actually need to do is you would need to get the size of that array, create an array that is bigger than that size based on how many positions you require. So in this case, if I just needed one more position, I would say array.length plus one, or array.length plus one, length being the immutable property that tells us how many positions are in the array, right? So the length of the array, so let's say it's got 5 positions, so it'll be 5, plus however many positions I want to add, 1 in this case. And then I would tell a new array, this is what your size will be. You will be of size 6. And the old array will get blown away and the new array will take its place. And for all intents and purposes, you would need to also, if you had values in that old array, transfer those values over to the new array. In lower level languages like C and C++, back in the day, we had to do this. In today's day and age, there are libraries that allow us to add a position to an array dynamically using some code that's written by a developer. It's not inherent to the programming language itself. The index is the ordinal position in the sequence, which means that the index of an array is the position at which the value we want sits. Up until this point, I have not said this phrase, but everything in computer science is a key value pair. I will say that again. Everything in computer science is a key value pair, which means in order to get a value, I need to pass in a key. So for a variable, if I wanted to get the value of the storage location, I would need to pass in the variable name. That variable name is the key by which, or the address of where that storage location is. All right. The key being the variable name. In this case, if I wanted to get a value out of an array, the key would be the index or the ordinal position of the element in the array. So if I wanted to get the value that sits in the first position, then I need to pass to the array in an indexed fashion the number 1. And the first element in the array is always indexed at 0. This is a computer science phenomenon. We do not start counting at 1. We start counting at 0. You can create a single dimensional array using the new operator, specifying the array element type and the number of elements. So if I want to process a single dimensional array, whether I'm trying to fill it with values or whatnot, what I actually need to take into consideration is that I need to use an array. I'm sorry, a loop. And that can be a while loop, a do while, a for, or whatever. Normally we use for loops because in for loops, we can determine when we want it to stop. We also use for each loops because it stops inherently when it reaches the end of an array and or collection. So it makes a lot of sense to use for loops or for each loops to iterate over an array. This also counts for printing the values in the array, which is something we're going to do once we pop on over to Visual Studio. But printing a value or printing the values in the array in most situations requires us as engineers and developers to iterate over the array one by one and pull those values out for printing and or parsing. And to that end, I'm logging into Visual Studio Code. I knew we were coming to this point, so I'm logging into Visual Studio at the moment, and we are going to start. I actually did a new install on my PC, so a lot of the products that I had on my old PC, I needed to install. I was actually going to record this video earlier in the week, and I did not for this reason. So here we go. And you can see everything's been much faster. I upgraded my PC. I'm much happier. So we're going to open a project, or no, what we're going to do, well, yeah, you know what? I will open a project and I will go to the old drive that I was at. So C, or maybe I think the drive is, it's not that one. 1 second. It is this one, I believe. Repos, programming in net. I think this is it. It's coming up on the separate screen right now. I'm going to move it over in a parsec for my Star Wars fans. Here we go. So luckily, we kind of already have some of the things that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this breakpoint. Why is it just sticking around? Go away. All right, whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this, but we're going to say it's an array. So we're going to change this from list string to array. And I'm going to use straight braces. And what that basically means is that I have an array, and this is the indexed location. This is where I would put the number that I'm indexing. So if I wanted to initialize it, meaning that I'm going to give it values, then all I really need to say is new. If we're using C#8, it looks like I'm not using C#8. I don't think I need to say new at all either. That actually should work. Oh, I did this wrong. Not array. This is going to be string. Got it. So this is how I would initialize an array. So remember what the word initialize means. Initialize means that I'm declaring the key. So in this case, I'm declaring the array of data type cars. So the key cars is the key. And I'm assigning a value of Chevy, Toyota, Ford, and Ram in the ordinal positions that they sit. So this is in the 0th position, 1st position, 2nd position, 3rd position. Okay. If I want to see what's inside this array, all I really have to do is do a for each loop. So we're going to use the same loop we did last time. I don't want this. I don't even know why it still exists, but we're going to leave it. And we're going to go ahead and debug. I'm going to click F5 because I trust that more than anything else. And everything's powering up. I can hear the flux capacitor getting going. The fans are blurring. All right. I don't want this breakpoint. I really don't want it. I don't know why it's sticking around there. It went away. Fantastic. So what I want to do is I want to start off by showing what the string array cars contains. All right. Remember, you don't have to put the data type in front. You can actually put it to the side as well. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you actually define the data type of the array. In this case, string array of named cars contains these values. So now if I look at cars, I can scroll over it when I'm debugging if I break. So I'm breaking here. Or I can come to the bottom and look at cars. And you can see here, 0, this is the key on the left-hand side. These are the keys, 0, 1, 2, 3, with their indexers, their proper indexers, and the names of the actual vehicles. So if I brought over my handy dandy output, you can see that it just iterated over Chevy. Cars, being that we're at the first iteration, is going to take the first value, which is in the 0th position, and place it into the variable car. Now car, it represents Chevy, and do the things. We've talked about this before, so we're just going to iterate over it, and we're finished. Great. If you look here, we have all the values. Now this is a for each loop, and this is the one I like the most. If I was going to do this in a way that I wanted to determine what's going on, or I wanted more control, I would actually use a for loop to do this. So in this case, I would say for, and instead of saying string car and cars, I would say, var int equals 0. In C#, we can use the var nomen, does not exist in the current context. What? I am confused. What does that mean? I mean, I should not have to. Oh, I'm having a giggle. Var I equals 0. As long as I is less than cars.length. So this is the length property, and you can see here gets the total number of elements in all the dimensions of the array, right? This is a immutable property of all arrays in all languages which use arrays. There's always a length property because it is always important to know how many positions an array has. Now, on the flip side of this, all right, how do we know something is an array? When it has the property length. So if you remember from our string conversation or our string lecture, strings are an array of characters. They're an array of chars. And because of that, you can look at the length property of the string data type, and you will get a value. Because a string is an array of characters, it is not a primitive value. So that being said, here you go, cars.length, and then I++. And as we talked about in our last class, this first parameter is where we start counting at. This is our iterator, our counter. The second property is where we want to stop. When do we want to stop? I want to stop when the end of this array occurs. And then I want to increment by 1 each time you iterate. Now, notice I have an error down here for car. And the reason why I have an error down here for car is because I removed the variable car. It no longer exists in this context. So now I need to do something with this. What I actually want to do is I want to look into the array cars, and I want it to return to me the value that is contained within the iterator. So in this first one, it's 0. It'll index the cars at the 0th position and return Chevy. This is the for loop way to iterate over an array. So if I start running this, it'll all print out. I didn't want that actually. If I ran this, there we go. So it stops. And now you can see I have the array cars. It's being indexed to the 0th position because I is 0. If you look at here, I is 0. So the value that I should get is Chevy. Now, there are situations where your arrays need to be multi-dimensional. And in those situations, you would need to use more than one for loop. And we're going to go over that in the multi-dimensional array module. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing this. If you haven't done so, please like and subscribe. More content's on the way. And as I say in all my videos, good luck, have fun, ciao.